where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about how changing customer interactions can increase revenue. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Jeffrey Anderson and Michael Kipfer. Welcome, guys. So glad to have you on the show.
Hi, thanks a lot for having us.
Thank you.
Love to hear a little bit about the work you're doing. You want to share a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So my name's Michael Kipfer. I'm an architectural designer here at Mancini Duffy. I'm principal and project manager, project architect, but I also work a lot in our research and development wing that we call the design lab. And I think what's interesting about this wing is Mancini Duffy as a company. We're a full service architecture firm, so we do architecture, interior design, master planning, things like that. And we have a full spectrum of clients, corporate clients like the Wells Fargos and Chase and things like that. And then we have more intimate clients, startups, companies like that. And they're all looking for different things. So there's a lot of services out there that we have to adapt for. And specifically our research and development department is trying to keep up with all of it.
My name is Jeffrey Anderson, and I work in the design lab in Mancini Duffy. And part of my job is to develop technologies, not only to help our designers design better and more efficiently, but also to change the way that we engage with clients. So changing the workflow, the design process, or making interactions happen more fluidly, or with COVID, making remote interactions more fulfilling. So developing AR and VR software for walking through our architectural projects before they're built, or developing technologies for clients to remotely view our design progress or engage with design meetings in a more three-dimensional way from home.
So architecture was a very, traditional, industry where a lot of probably in-person meetings, visioning maybe like a law firm where everybody's in suits and they're showing up and discussing the plans and things like that. At least that's what it is in the movies. But it sounds like you guys realized that would not last forever. So talk to me a little bit about the changes that Mancini made to maybe engage with the future.
I think it's really interesting because the architectural process is it's an old process. I mean, you look all the way back to ancient times, there's always architecture involved, right? And the way the industry works, at least traditionally, is to go through an architectural design process. You always start with we call it pre-design, right? So whether it's a new building and you're looking for zoning or you're checking building code to see how tall of a building you can make, you do kind of all of those initial designs with the client or a developer. Or if it's an interiors, you're doing what we call a test fit. So you're taking an empty space and let's say a bank is looking to put a bunch of offices there. You say, okay, you can, with this much square footage, you can get about this many desks. You can have this many conference rooms, and this is what you'll need to plan for. So once pre-design's over, you go to a schematic design phase where you're kind of refining those test fits or the building forms. You're starting to play with materials, colors, things like that. Then there's a design development where you get more refined. Then you have contract documents where you're actually documenting how to build it. And then you have this procurement phase where the contractors are taking all your drawings and buying out all the trades, and then you have the construction. In that process, throughout time, you can imagine we have less and less time to complete those phases. And what traditionally happens is, the architects will take all the plans and they'll sketch ideas and they'll kind of do that by themselves without really any client feedback until, your typical bi-weekly meeting. So, every 2 weeks we'll show 3 concepts to them and the client will sit there and say, I like a little bit of option A, but I also like option C. Can you put a little bit together, and then we'll go away for 2 more weeks and we'll refine more, and then we'll show it to them and say, how do you like this? And they'll be like, oh, we forgot to tell you, we would never have our pantry over there. It needs to be over next to this person. And it started to become just it was just a big time sucker, right? Like you're sitting there in a silo designing by yourself, and you're putting all this energy into this documentation and title blocks and checking your spelling and diagramming all your moves. And we started just falling behind. And I think the industry as a whole started to fall behind of giving clients instant gratification and an easy way to check the status of where you are in the process. These days you order something from Uber Eats or Seamless, and you know exactly where the driver is, you know exactly when your food's prepared. And in our service industry, we have trouble keeping everyone up to date. So we invented kind of this whole new design process. We call it the 360 design process, where using things that Jeff studies like AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, and different technologies like 3D printing and projection mapping, we're having the clients come into our design lab, which is complete with a VR arena and a bunch of space tracked with infrared sensors. And we're opening all the programs in front of them. We have the floor plan open, we have the VR model open, we have the 3D modeling program ready, and we're designing with them. And we're making moves, we're pushing masses, we're moving furniture, and they're seeing that process that we normally went away for 2 weeks to do, and we're doing it right in front of them. And as we move things, they're like, oh yeah, we would never do that, do this. And then they would say, how about we do this? And we would say, let us show you why that doesn't work. Instead of diagramming out why it doesn't work, we're just showing them how it doesn't work. And we're saving a lot of time doing that. We like to say we can do in 2 weeks what other people do in 2 weeks in 2 hours, just from all of the instant gratification that's happening. So it's really sped up everything, and it's increased the client's decision-making ability to know what they want. And they get to see a little bit of our end, and we get to see a little bit of their end. So it's a really good communication process.
Sounds like it. Jeffrey, you were part of a lot of the technology, right, behind all of this. So how did you guys, I guess, even come to explore those types of technologies, AR, VR, and how quickly was there a testing process where you tested it on certain people, like prototyping? Like, talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, while I was in school, I started playing with game engines as a way to produce and experience architecture simultaneously. So for my thesis, I made a kind of VR design software where you use gestures to make a kind of space around you. After I graduated, Kip reached out to me and basically offered me the opportunity to continue working on that thesis through developing technologies in the design lab. So this idea of creating and experiencing simultaneously shifted into this new kind of workflow where it wouldn't be the architect necessarily doing this. It could be a client who might say, I want to see what it looks like to see what that wall would look like as brick. And instead of saying, come back in 2 weeks and you can experience that, they just reach out and touch it. So as we started working on this, we actually had an excellent client named Jan, who owns these restaurants called Boqueria in New York, which has been spreading to other cities around the country. And basically since 2017, he's been engaging with us to develop and use this workflow. So we started with, a simple VR program where you could move around your space and maybe pick up objects and slide them around. And Jan used this to create really specific kind of design moments in his restaurants. And as he was using this week by week, he'd say, oh, I wish we had a tape measure tool, or I wish we had a note making tool, or I wish I could change the materials on the fly in this. So I was kind of programming this to work with him as we expanded this to other clients. So eventually we kind of branded this and developed this program that we called the Tool Belt. And eventually we developed it to such a degree that we have this kind of spin-off company, the Tool Belt company, that sells the Tool Belt software as a kind of secondary revenue source for Mancini Duffy.
No, I mean, as a person who's just a homeowner, I would love something like that. You know, they have very rudimentary things on websites where you supposedly can move furniture around and see what it looks like, but it's really lacking, and it doesn't really let you engage and have that feel. So I can definitely see where the opportunity is in the market. What kind of reaction have you gotten so far then from clients? What's some of the results?
It's been amazing. I mean, especially people like Jan in the restaurant business. You know, they bring in their chefs and they go into the kitchens and they start calibrating the furniture and the food line, and you know, they'll bring two people in and act out how to do the dishwashing line and efficiencies through kind of these back of house spaces. You know, we had always thought about, you know, we have to make sure all the materials are there and make sure they like the paint color or the brick color. But we actually found that, you know, warehouses, logistics, restaurants, anyone who has kind of a task that needs to be done efficiently and well, you know, they're coming in here and they're acting out their space. And I mean, the feedback has been amazing just from them being able to experience it. Not only from an aesthetic point of view, but from an operational point of view.
Yeah. Well, I imagine we're going to see trends like this happening in other industries. I'd be curious, Michael, how you even thought to engage Jeffrey and like thought that the industry needed to, I mean, well, I guess you mentioned it was like taking a long time. And so you're trying to solve the time problem, but, you know, just, can you kind of generalize a little bit maybe around that so that other people in other industries might be like, oh, what else can I do? You know, how did that process work for you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's definitely one of those things that at the end of the day, you know, we want to make our job easier, you know, the whole thing, you know, work smarter, not harder, right? And some of the things we used to do, you know, we use the term a lot called parametricism, where you do one thing and it auto does a bunch of other tasks, right? So in our computer software, to actually draw the actual drawings, AutoCAD used to be the big thing, and then there started to be new types of technology where you could actually draw walls that know they're walls. So in AutoCAD, you draw a line and you draw two lines and it makes an applied wall. But in these newer programs, you're drawing an object that knows it's a wall. It knows that it has this big of a stud inside of it and these two layers of gypsum, and it knows, you know, how it's attached to the floor. And, you know, honestly, we just kind of were sitting in the office one day and we were just talking about how, you know, why are we drawing all this in 2D when most people can only see it in 3D? You know, sometimes we have to pinch ourselves and realize that not all people can think, think in 3D, and that we need to find a way that everyone can look at the same thing and be on a level playing field. And I think that has really pushed us to kind of make the architectural language a little bit more universal. And I think you could see that in a lot of industries. I think you look at, you know, just general UI design and making sure that a customer understands what they're getting and they know what they're getting themselves into, and they know the next step of the way, and that you're very clear with them on how to communicate. First, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and then we'll be here. I mean, 3D and VR and walking around your space in real time is probably the most, clear, obvious answer to making sure that our clients know what they're getting, right? We're literally showing it to them and having them experience it. So, I mean, to go back to your original question, I think if we were going to look at this outside of our industry, it would just be making sure everyone knows what's going on.
Interesting. Jeffrey, what do you see as 2.0 or 3.0? Like what's going to happen next 5 years from now?
So I think, we've seen a big adoption of like consumer VR now. So you're starting to get these headsets that are like $200 and require no setup at all. So I think engaging with, clients that might not need to come to our special room where we have all this equipment and these special computers to run this stuff, that we might have remote engagements with clients. So we need to be able to share our models remotely and engage in a virtual space in a kind of multi-user setting. That's something we're working on now, making a web platform for our Toolbelt software that we're starting to roll out for a couple projects internally in the office. But I think that'll also spread more and more, just the ease of use and the kind of persistence of that like virtual model that you can engage with. So something that was kind of interesting was after we made this software and made it available to everyone remotely, our clients like didn't want to download something. They just wanted it to work. So that's why we kind of shifted to this version of it that works inside of your Google Chrome browser or whatever. But I think that kind of universality and adaptability to different devices, or if someone is just on their laptop, or if someone's on their mobile phone and wants to engage with the architect or like check in on the progress of their project or leave comments remotely without having to have a face-to-face meeting. I think this kind of like leveling of all the technology and kind of universal application of it is what we're working on next.
It was really interesting. The first time we took the prototype of the tool belt and gave it to a client, you have to realize that we're working on basically, super machines that we've created that have these very high-tech graphics cards and processors and things like that. And so, we had gotten to a point where, yay, the tool belt's done, let's give it to someone. And we gave it to our client and we forgot that they're just using a standard laptop
or a Mac.
Yeah, or a Mac or something like that. And it just epically failed the first time we tried it. And then we had to kick ourselves and say, oh, wait, not everyone is using these high-powered computers. How do we make sure everyone can do this? And that's what Jeff was saying with the web. But on the opposite of that, with the growth of graphics, GPU and CPU and all of the built-in horsepower that's coming stock with some of these consumer computers, that's growing at an exponential rate. So in some way, technology is catching up with us. So the next big file we import, I feel like every month, the average computer is better at handling it. So that's been exciting to see what inherently is built into everyone else's tech that we can have them experience our process together.
Absolutely. So how has this introducing this type of engagement, has it changed the demographics of your clients at all?
I think so. I mean, we definitely work with a lot more startups which generally are run by younger people. I think, in general, people they want to see things and they want to interact with things, and with social media out there and videos and streaming and Netflix and all that kind of stuff, in one day you're used to a very hyperactive kind of peripheral of a lot of things going on at once. And I think, with our process where we're able to show a lot of information at one time, it has catered itself to kind of more of, the tech hungry types of clientele that you normally would see.
I think
And
also the startup crowd is in some ways trying to figure out what they need in an architectural space, right? So their company may be growing at a rate that they're trying to figure out how many desks do I need, or what type of space might work best for me. And they need to sit down with someone that can engage them in real time and share some intelligence about this and let them discover things as they kind of visualize it.
yeah, it's funny because we have a food startup right now, and they have this really awesome concept of a new way to deliver food. And normally, I guess the old school way is, if we sat down with, let's say, a Wells Fargo, they have 100-page manual of the ratios they need of this employee gets this type of desk, this type of locker. They come in Monday through Friday from this time to this time. They have these holidays off. They literally have every single thing specified. Then you get this food startup who's literally just like 2 years old. They started with 6 people, and I think now they're over 300 people. But our first day with them wasn't them showing us a 100-page manual. It was us saying, okay, how many employees do you have? And they're like, well, 8 right now, but I think we're growing. Okay, what's your projection model? We don't know. And then like, oh, what are your shifts? And they say, I don't know. We've never existed before, right? And so it was.
But we just got $10 million to
yeah. They're like, well, we have plenty of money to play with anything we need to, and so you're sitting there, and you're almost like their coaching them through, like, okay, in a building, you need this type of room for this and that type of room for that, and they're definitely exploring, and their eyes are really big, just watching all the building blocks come together. We call it programming, where we're just programming all the different spaces that they need, and pushing and pulling until they feel like that would all make sense.
I think we're also attracting a lot of like experience-based clients, right? So an office space for a bank doesn't really need a huge focus on the entirety of the experience. Maybe they have some special areas that are important, the entry and public spaces where clients might go. But for something like a restaurant, it's all about the experience and the cadence of that experience and what a person feels when they walk through the space. So I think we've attracted a lot more restaurant clientele in the last couple of years since we started using this technology.
And so do you think that it's led to have you seen more innovative design that way because it's quicker and people can have, share ideas and have, see that instant response, that it's actually led to some more interesting designs?
Yeah, I think so. You definitely get a lot more iterations, and you definitely learn a lot more about why you like your design or why you don't like a design. I think if you ask some of our designers in the office, they say they're making too many decisions, and I think that's a debate that the architectural world in general is going to have as we kind of burst some of these old school bubbles where, like we were saying before, when you sit in a silo for 2 weeks, you want everything to be perfect because you're a designer and you like everything to be beautiful. And you're definitely exposing yourself to scrappy, you're not going to make something perfect in 2 seconds while they're in front of you, but you're training everyone to see what you need and see the design intent. And so I think the concepts that come out of them, out of these sessions, are a lot more powerful, that when we do go away and we work for the week or 2 weeks, after one of these sessions, we're spending a lot more time on what we know matters to the client. And so the concepts that back our designs are a lot more powerful, and that inherently leads to better design.
Yeah, and I think we waste a lot less time just making options, and we narrow in on what the most important elements of the design are, and then we can focus on making them better for that 2 weeks, as opposed to making 3 options just to make 3 to show the client at some meeting 2 weeks from now. I also think that we have 2 types of clients that engage with this. One is like decision makers. So they see the VR model, do the walkthrough, maybe move some things around a little bit, and then they're like, okay, I don't need to see it again. Just go ahead. They're more interested in the spatial planning. And then we get clients, and this is the kind of danger of it, that become the designer. So they're super particular and they want constant updates and they want to see everything photorealistic. And those are clients that we now need to manage a bit, where the design process with those 2-week meetings and 3 options would kind of automatically manage the client. This is like, okay, well, now I can see all of the duct work and I want the duct work to be 1 inch over and I want to see that again. Like, so those types of clients, we need to kind of control that design phase a little bit. Of this meeting is not about the ducts, this meeting is about the space. And then once the space is set, then we deal with the materials and then we deal with everything else that goes along with it.
Mm. Kind of a silly question, but then do you get people who think they're now the expert and like, why do I even need a designer? I'll just do it myself.
Exactly.
I think consumers forget how much expertise lies behind things. Like, you serve something up that simplifies it, but it only simplifies maybe the decision making. It's not actually simplifying the whole process and everything that goes behind it. It's like the law websites where you can enter in some stuff and get a contract. You're like, oh, what do I need a lawyer for? Well, lawyer thinks about all the things that a survey question can't ask you. And
I think that's why it's important to have the expertise in the room while we're doing these interactions with clients. So an architect can say, this type of space with this much occupancy needs this many bathrooms, and the bathrooms need to be this big, and we can't just have more tables because the bathrooms take up whatever, 1/3 of the area that we have. And to be able to do that in real time, or to be able to share expertise about accessibility and things like that are what the architect deals with on a day-to-day basis as we bring the project towards reality.
You mentioned the issue with designing something that only worked on advanced computers and that challenge. Are there any other lessons learned that you've taken from this that you're like, oh, if we did it again, we'd do this a little differently, or we would avoid this problem? Anything else come to mind there?
Yeah, I mean, something I'm working on right now is kind of exporter importer to make our 3-dimensional models lighter so that they can run on more computers. I think that we started out being kind of spoiled by our kind of processing power on our computers in the lab. So I think, starting over again, beginning with like the lowest or the most accessible devices that everyone can use, would be one way to go. Although having the lab and having a kind of special experience when coming there as a kind of like super duper conference room also, I feel like, got us new clients who might be coming kind of shopping around for an architect and see this as a distinct experience with an architect.
It's been interesting because, going back to that kind of not enough processing power, if you look at a video game, you look at the design of it and they get pretty realistic these days, but that's a whole company's team working on one video game for, years, sometimes many years. And they're downsizing all of the textures and the materials and, making the landscapes and the scenes, and they're making it all to be very efficient. That's almost half of video game design, is making sure everything is very efficient when it comes to polygons and models used to make things. But we don't have 2 years to just downsize one design option, right? So when our 3D programs that we're using are very sophisticated programs that, like I said, they know the studs inside of a wall, they know the gypsum, they know the brick, they know each individual brick, and you put a furniture item, it knows every single nut and bolt. And we have to somehow take a whole high-rise building, click an export button, and have it run on someone's home computer, right? And so that's the biggest thing Jeff is working on right now is taking that huge model that is in no way efficiently modeled.
It's modeled towards accuracy as
Yeah.
opposed to like rendering polygon efficiency.
Yeah, in finding a way to make that work. So I mean, that's definitely the hardest part. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that if we started over, we would do first or do differently. But I mean, it's a really hard question because we definitely have more things that we want to do. And I think it's more of we wish we had enough time in the day to do everything we want to do. Because we're really getting into AR right now. We have the glasses coming. I think they actually just arrived. I saw a UPS person here, but with VR, some clients turn away from it because you are going into a fully immersive world where there's not context around you. And some people, if there's a room of 5 people, they don't feel comfortable with everyone looking at them, but then not seeing everyone else. So we do have some people shy away from that. Other people, if they're really sensitive to motion, sometimes they don't do so well inside those goggles. And I think that has limited VR to be good for 100% of our clients. I think, there's definitely, you either have a client that absolutely loves it and wants it every single day, or you have a client that says, absolutely no. We don't really have the in-betweens where they're like, oh yeah, I guess we could do that. But AR, I think with the clear glasses and actually being able to map onto different spaces while you're in the real world, but with virtual world overlay, I think that's going to completely change kind of everything that we do, especially as we start building things. We're working with one of our clients, actually Tian for Korea. A big thing that's always up for discussion or debate when designing the restaurants are the spacings of the tables, heights of the countertops, heights of the chairs, and how everything correlates. And we're going to simulate everything at the actual restaurant. We're going to have one side where everything's up, just mock-up tables are there on sawhorses. And then we're going to have the other side that we're going to put the AR glasses on. And we're going to see kind of the real world effects versus the simulated effects and test between AR and mock-ups. And if we found a way to not have to do a real world mock-up, it would save our clients a lot of money and things that have to be done in order to prove kind of formal adjacencies that you just have to test. A lot of people just have to test things in the physical world, and being able to do that with AR, I think, would be a huge step forward for us.
Interesting. Any other sort of surprise learnings, like things that you came out and maybe a little tangential to what you were doing? You're like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect that result, or something like that.
We had a really interesting client engagement moderately early on in the development phase where we were getting all of our consultants together in the room with a client to do a VR session. And we had the mechanical consultant send us their 3D model of the ductwork. So the mechanical consultant figures out the loads and pathways and positions of all the air input and output. And then as the architects, we design like a soffit, something for all of that mechanical stuff to hide in. So we had done that coordination with the mechanical consultant. And then we said, send us your model. The client's coming in tomorrow and we'll all discuss it. So their model came in and all of the mechanical was 1 foot outside of the soffit running through the space. So we said, okay, we will wait on the client meeting, but we want to have the mechanical consultant come in so that we can describe to them how the architectural features work and how it correlates to the areas that we've given for the mechanical consultants to do their job. So that turned into another really interesting kind of coordination within this. That was kind of surprising. We thought we would just have like a simple everyday meeting with the client in VR. And we ended up having this kind of like back and forth teaching and learning session with the mechanical consultant.
Michael, what about you? Anything that you had?
So, I mean, I feel like I'm surprised a lot, but I think it's definitely, just trying to think. I'm trying to think of something that we started. In the 3D printing world, I think we learned a lot about how AR and VR can come together with an actual product itself. So we do have 3D printers in the lab, and we attended this tech conference. It was actually the Formlabs conference in Boston, and at the time it was a startup, but now they're a full-blown company, and they make 3D printers and other things, and they had all these panelists up, and there were dental people and orthodontist people, and they were talking about 3D printing, molds and forms, and talking about all the breakthroughs and advancements with 3D printing. And I realized that there were no architects that were speaking at this conference, and we had a couple 3D printers at the time, and so I went up to the people afterwards, and I was like, why don't you have any architects here? And they said, well, all you all do is print scaled models of your buildings. You don't really use this for anything fun. And I was like, oh boy, like challenge accepted. So we went back and we were all kind of just talking about, well, why do we just print scaled models of our buildings? Why can't we actually 3D print materials and installations? And we are the designers, and when you're dealing with integrations of design through products, you're kind of stuck to the specifications that a product brings with it. I'd like this big a panel. Well, sorry, it only comes in this size, not the size you want. And we're sitting there like, well, why don't we just make our own systems? And so we had a client where we were designing this brick wall. It was in one of their lobbies. It was kind of, a Class A building, renovating everything from head to toe. They wanted a really beautiful lobby. And we had this thin brick system, and they had also procured our services to do the decor in the lobby as well. And they said, we want artwork behind the reception desk. And we said, well, what if it wasn't just a picture on the wall? What if the brick and the architectural details were the artwork? So we worked out this 3D printed brick system that actually integrated with the brick and mortar bricks, and in the 3D printed brick could come in and clip into a system with a light embedded behind it. And it was this crazy, awesome installation. And the bricks had these seams through it that tied with the surrounding neighborhood, old railroad lines. So there was symbolism in it and all that good stuff. And then we go to the contractor and we say, this is what we're doing. This is what we're going to provide. And the contractor said, well, how am I going to install that? Like, I have a guy whose job is to build a wall and then lay bricks and put mortar down and lay bricks. He's not going to know what to do with this crazy complicated thing that you're going to 3D print. That's probably a lot of money. And so Jeff was part of that conversation. And we were like, well, what if we could take all of your subcontractors, and what if we could project instructions onto the wall so that they know exactly what to do in a very detailed format. So, different subs have responsibilities for different things. So your carpenter is going to build the back wall, then your mason is going to come do the brick, but then your electrician has to come draw all the holes. And there's this crazy orchestra of all these subcontractors that have to do this one thing for just this very simple 3D printed wall, I guess. And so Jeff made a projection mapping system. It showed where the wall needed to be roughed out. It showed where all the electrical lines needed to be run through the wall. It showed where every single brick needed to be laid. Each 3D printed brick was different, so it projected a different letter and number that tied the 3D printed brick to that. And we mocked it all up with the contractors, and they said, okay, this makes a lot more sense. So I thought it was just interesting that, you know, a lot of different technologies came together to solve a design problem that, you know, normally we would be hindered with, whether it's the labor not being skilled enough to do it, or the material from the supply chain just not being good enough for what the client or the designer wanted. So I think that's a really good example of how everything kind of came together to solve a problem for a client.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I can just imagine, like, a simple thing of building a house. They came in and they tiled the entire wall, and they were only supposed to tile a part of it, and you know, and because of that, they couldn't hang a mirror. And so it's just interesting, like, if it makes sense because somebody's not there. They look at a plan maybe once before they go in, and they just start working, and it's just not there. So it's really fascinating.
And you need to do that translation from the 2D drawing to the 3D space,
right.
And there can be ambiguity in that.
Yeah, no, that's this whole conversation has been really fascinating. We are running out of time, so I'd love to hear, you know, what kind of the top 3, you know, things you want to leave with in folks' mind before we end.
I think that the number one thing is that things don't have to be how they always have been. That this design process, you know, embedded in the discipline, in light of new technologies, needed to be revised. And I think that we've found a lot of efficiencies within that. And by having clients that aren't scared to experiment with us a little bit, we've made things better both for the clients and for us as designers.
Yeah, I think tagging along to what Jeff's saying is, you know, with R&D, a lot of people, I think there's 2 approaches to R&D in general. Is you either take all of your scientists and throw them in a basement and throw food down to them every now and then, and don't let them see light until they have the perfect thing. But we didn't do that. We ask our clients to R&D with us. Every project we do is a real-time R&D experiment. It doesn't always go right. But the clients, when they see that they're part of something special, it's okay that it doesn't always go right. And I think to always experiment, to always ask questions, and to always be completely open and transparent, and not be afraid to test something, even if you don't know it works. We've never had a client yell at us because we thought we could do this crazy computer simulation and then our computer crashed or something. Our computer has crashed plenty of times and everything has gone okay. And so I think it's just, don't be afraid to try new things and collaborate openly with people.
Absolutely.
And I think finally, you know, being willing to try new things can have unexpected results, like bringing in a different mix of clients, where, you know, maybe offices aren't as popular anymore, but luckily we now have a mix of restaurants and startups and healthcare coming in to our office to kind of diversify our client mix in the office.
No, those are great. And I really appreciate your time today. How can people learn more about Mancini, or where can they go to learn more about the toolkit? No, the tool belt. I lost the name.
You can go to manciniduffy.com to explore our website, which has a kind of architectural clientele portal and also a research and development portal. And then you can also go to thetoolbelt.com to have a look at the software. And if you are an architectural client or an architectural designer, you may find that tool helpful for you. And you can download it there, and also plugins that could be helpful for your design process.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.
Hey! So tomorrow, right now.